Hello, world, and welcome to another exciting and interesting and fascinating and entertaining episode of the Little Bit Different podcast with your host, Corey Sterling. What's up? I hope this finds you well wherever you might be in the world. Listening to this, whatever time it might be, whatever you're doing, I hope that everything is fantastic and super with you. I am really excited to share this week's episode because I'm going deep into the annals of my personal travel history to share a very profound experience that I had in Sri Lanka when I participated in a Vipassana meditation course. And I was thinking about what I wanted to share this week on the podcast, and the reason why this felt like an appropriate topic is that there are some really cool and important lessons that I learned from my experience in Vipassana and in Sri Lanka that stick with me to this day and that I continue to carry with me. And so it was a profound and transformative experience. And also just because it's a funny random travel story where I had no idea what I was getting myself into and what would happen. And more important than that, it's made a really lasting impact in my life. And one thing that is so magical about travel, and something that I love so much about travel, and especially being in foreign and exotic places, is that in a very short period of time, you can have an experience that will profoundly change you and alter the course of your life, either by teaching you a habit, giving you an experience, shifting your perspective, whatever it is. And for me, my time in Sri Lanka was like that, and the experience in Sri Lanka was like that. So I wanna share what the story was and what I learned. And it's also interesting because when I look back on the different chapters of travel that I've had in my life and the different stories that I've learned, there are some periods where I spent years in a place, and there's nothing on a daily basis. There's almost nothing that I think about from that place or those years or those experiences. Most likely there are friends who I keep in touch with, and we'll laugh about fun times or whatever it is that we did. But there are other places where you just go through something and you experience something, and it's so completely different and raw and real that it really shifts the way that you look at things, and you pick up habits that stick with you for the rest of your life. So I am going to talk about my experience in Vipassana in Sri Lanka in this episode, and I hope that you enjoy it. At this point in my personal story and journey, I was in a very different place than where I am now. Obviously, the year was 2017, and I was finishing up at the ashram in India. And the ashram in India, I've recorded an episode about it. It was something so cool and really expansive and opened my mind, and I met so many different people, and I was just dipping my toe really into learning and studying this yoga world, this meditation world, and what all of it looked like. And at the start, the ashram was very difficult, but as I got through it, I was like, oh cool, I love this. I'm so into getting up at 4:30 in the morning and sitting and meditating and chanting and just going with it and loving it. And there was a woman from Singapore, I forget her name. There was a woman from Singapore at the ashram who we were talking about stuff, and she's like, yeah, and I think you'd really love Vipassana. And I'm like, what's Vipassana? Naturally. And she explained to me that Vipassana is essentially, it's a silent retreat, a silent 10-day meditation retreat where you go and you sit for 10 days in silence, and you sit and meditate, let's say, 8-9 hours a day, and you are supposed to be silent for the entire time. And she's like, yeah, Corey, you'd really benefit from it. And I don't know how well you know me, but for me, when someone's like, yeah, Corey, you would really like this, especially when I was a little bit younger, I was much more impressionable. Crazy that, being 33 was younger, but that's besides the point. But I was like, cool, like this is the universe. The universe is talking to me, right? The universe is talking to me and telling me to go to Vipassana. So I was like, cool, I'm going to do it. And I looked online. I was in India. I didn't know where I was going to go next. I didn't really have a plan. So this was like perfect. I'm like, cool, I'll find. Wasn't able to find a Vipassana center in India that was available. And then I found in Sri Lanka, there was one spot available, and it started like 3 days after the retreat, the ashram, once we finished the yoga teacher training at the ashram. So like the timing lined up, and I was like, cool, like this is the next thing. I've done the ashram. This is the next thing for me to do. I'm going to go do it. Didn't really look at the location, didn't look at the place, didn't look at the facilities, didn't look at anything. I was like, cool, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I meant to do. And when I look back on this decision to go to Vipassana in northern Sri Lanka, maybe there's a reason this was the only center that was that had availability, because it was so remote, and the journey of getting there was so much fun. I was in Colombo. I took all these different trains. I would just like chill at these different train stations, waiting for connections, drinking chai, talking with people, and just being in love with travel and loving life, and so happy to find a way to get to this place. But when I look at it, I sort of looked at spirituality and self-development and meditation as a treadmill. And I was like, oh, cool, like this is the next thing. Like I'm just going to keep going, and I'm just going to keep going. And I never really stopped and thought about what I was getting myself into and what my priorities should be. And I sort of just got, and I do have a tendency to do this, I got swept away and carried away in the moment of just like, oh, cool, like if someone told me to go do this thing, I'm going to go do this thing. This is the right thing for me to do, and this is really, really going to help and be great for me. And so I just went. I just assumed that it was the natural next step after having just done a yoga teacher training and lived in an ashram for a month, that I would go to Vipassana. I was like, cool, it's a challenge. I love challenges. I want to do it. I'm going to go. So basically my intention was just that. I just felt like I had boxes to tick in a spirituality journey, and this was the next box. And I arranged all of my affairs to be there. At this point, just note this, I started my online business. I started traveling in September, October. The first, classic. I was in Denmark for a little bit, and then I was in the Middle East for a little bit, and then like maybe 1 week in Denmark, 2 weeks in the Middle East, and then I flew to India, and then I was in the ashram. I was essentially offline, which is, a great tip for an online entrepreneur who's trying to build an online business in an industry that not typically works online. Hello, world. This is Corey from A Little Bit Different Podcast. I'm going to tell you a statistic now. You're not going to believe it. Only 22% of people who listen to the Little Bit Different Podcast actually subscribe or like the channel. So right now, I'm on a mission to get 250 subscribers to the channel by the end of the year. Will you help me? I'm hoping that the answer is yes. So please, anytime you watch any of our content, hit subscribe, that whole button there, and like it and share it and keep being different and having the most fun ever. So I spent a month in the ashram, and I never thought about the business or what I was doing or anything like that. I was like, cool, like I was still in traveler mode. I wasn't in entrepreneurial mode. And so maybe not the best look as an online entrepreneur to start your business, be offline for a month, and then get ready to go be offline for another 10 days. But I had a box to check, and I did it, and I went. Looking back on my personal process at this point, I was doing it because I had a box to check, but I also thought that it was cool. And it is pretty cool to be in these parts of the world and go on a spiritual journey. And I think that that's the right thing to do. I think that there was an element of ego involved as well. And I remember that I have a mailing list with family and friends that whenever I travel or I'm doing something, I'll always write a big long email to everyone about what I'm doing. And I wrote an email called Why Meditate? And it was like, cool, like this is me. This is my ego attached to the situation. I'm so good. I'm in Sri Lanka. I'm going to meditate. I'm such a meditator. And I remember sending it out and just being like, dude, Corey, you're killing it, bro. Like my ego was just like, yeah, dude. Yeah, you're awesome, Corey. This is so perfect. This is exactly what you should be doing. And I was like, cool. All right. I'm in, I'm going for it. I'm going to try. Again, the trip to getting to the place, all of the normal centers like in Colombo or in cooler, more touristy areas were all full. I booked it on very short notice. I had this crazy journey to get to this center in the north of Sri Lanka. And I ended up, I got there on time, which is big for me. And whoa. So this was like, when people had told me about other experiences of doing Vipassana, they described like sort of like pseudo luxurious settings or being very comfortable and delicious food or whatever. I got to the place, they show me my room. It looked, wow. And this is the Sri Lanka. I'd just been in India for a bit, so I was accustomed to it, but even still I was shocked. It was like a tiny room, a rusted bed frame with like a super thin mattress folded over, spiders everywhere. I was just like, whoa, okay, cool. I was doing it. We go for dinner the night before, and I don't think there was that much speaking. I don't really remember, but I just remember dinner. It was like crackers and rice for dinner, and I was like, sweet. Yeah, sweet enough. Just, getting stoked for my dinner of crackers and rice. And to say that I was uncomfortable would be an understatement. Vipassana also, I don't think you pay. I think maybe you can make a donation at the end, but they don't charge money, so it's everyone who's there is a volunteer. And the Vipassana experience is amazing, and I'll talk about it in a second, but this specific location was just like very run down. Yeah, I wasn't comfortable in the space. Maybe that's part of the experience of not being comfortable. I've heard a variety of stories of different friends who've done it since, some of whom have been in really, really comfortable situations with delicious food and a beautiful room or something like that. And others who have also had more, let's say rustic experiences. And essentially when it started, you sit and meditate and you're not supposed to move. So you're supposed to be in a seated position, and I think you wake up at like 4:30 or 4. You sit for 2.5 hours, and then you break for breakfast. You're silent the whole time, and then you sit some more, and then you have a break, and then you can like do a walking meditation. You're supposed to be silent. Sometimes they'll give you like a small task or something to do, and then you sit, and essentially the whole day is just, dinner was at 4 p.m. At the center where I was. So it's just like, it's completely out of everything. Obviously no caffeine, really, really basic food. And you're just spending the whole day sitting and meditating. And then at night, they'll show you instructional videos of the person who has founded Vipassana. They show you videos and they teach you technique of how you're supposed to breathe and how to meditate and what happens. And then like, obviously, it's a shock because you go from living your normal life to suddenly having to sit for, 10 hours a day in complete silence, very, very uncomfortable, a lot of physical pain, not supposed to be moving around, not speaking. So it's a lot at once. It's like jumping into the fire. And for me, I think it was jumping into the fire plus this experience of being really uncomfortable and not really being prepared. And if I'm looking back, not going for the right reasons. Like, I think the right reasons to go are to develop, to connect with yourself, to quiet your mind, to sort of defeat your ego to some degree, to learn the techniques for meditation. And I wasn't really there for that. I was like sort of on like a Hollywood tour. It's like, oh, here's the next stop on my spirituality tour. Like, I'm just going to go do this thing. And it rocked me. When I look back on the process and how I was doing and what my mindset was at the time, I felt like I was doing great. The third day was complete. I didn't feel comfortable. I was able to sit for the meditations. I was in the ashram, maybe a week before, where we were meditating, not to the same degree, for the same consistency and the same time, but definitely, I'd spent a lot of time meditating. So I was sort of in that zone of being a little bit uncomfortable and practicing meditation and all of that. And the fourth day started, And okay, you wake up at, didn't sleep, super uncomfortable, wake up at 4:30, do the meditations, all the things are happening, like following the program, practicing the techniques, like enjoying it, loving it. And then it was the fourth day, and it was the afternoon meditation, the sitting meditation. And there was a thought that came into my mind that I was unable to defeat. And at this point, think about a lot of things when you are sitting for 10 hours a day in silence. And you're in Sri Lanka and you feel very far from home and you're very uncomfortable. Naturally, you're going to have a lot of thoughts that come over you. And there was a thought that came to me where I felt that for the first time, I felt that I was being irresponsible with my business. I was like, Corey, is this really what you should be doing? Like you just set this big dream goal to have an online business and be a lawyer online in 2017, which was not a thing. Like no one was doing it. And I was like, am I being irresponsible? Like, should I be focusing on my business? Should I be doing all of this? And then I had like the thought of the knockout punch. And the thought for the knockout punch was, I had talked for about 2 years before starting Conscious Counsel about writing a book called the Yoga Law Book. And I was like, I know once I write this book, there aren't really any other lawyers talking about yoga law. I think, I love yoga. I'm super passionate about it. It's a massive industry. There's no lawyers paying attention to yoga studios. And this thought just buried me. And the thought buried me, and I was just constantly, I couldn't escape it. And this up until this point, until I had this thought where, it dawned on me that maybe I was being irresponsible with my business, none of this crossed my mind. But the thought just came to me where I was like, the one thing that I have to do right now, I have to write this yoga law book. And I have to make this book happen. And the thought could not leave. And there was one specific thought that I always had that just drilled into my head. And that thought was like, because obviously now I'm contemplating, like for the first time, I'm giving myself permission to entertain the idea of getting up from Vipassana and not completing the 10 days. After I have set, at this point, I've sent an email out to all of my family and friends saying that I'm going to do it. And B, I'm not a quitter. That's not part of my personality. It's not really who I am. And there was one thought that was just glaringly so strong and evident in my mind. And it was this question. It was, would you be satisfied if you finished Vipassana but never wrote the yoga law book? And my answer to that was no. I would not be satisfied if I never wrote the yoga law book. And conversely, the other question was, would you be satisfied if you quit Vipassana but it meant that you could write the yoga law book? And the answer was yes. And in that moment, all of my priorities shifted. It was just like one moment where I was like, I have to leave right now and I have to write this book. Obviously, years later, 7 years later, talking about this, it worked out. I grew my business. I've worked really, really hard. I wrote the book. I've done all these things. But at the time, I still hadn't proven to myself that I could do it and that I would do it and that I could do something like writing a book and finish the book. And honestly, the decision to leave Vipassana, the conversation in my mind happened in 6 minutes. In 6 minutes, I was like, am I being irresponsible with my business? What am I doing here? I never wrote that book. And like, I talked to people about how I was going to write the book, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to write a book. And I don't know, writing a book was just a chip on my shoulder always. I've always been a writer as well. I worked in professional sports as a writer. I've written emails to my family and friends my whole life. And it was just this moment of clarity where it was so clear. I was like, if you quit Vipassana but you write the yoga law book, will it be a success? And I decided in that moment, I got up, I left the room, I packed my bags, the meditation ended, I went to the Vipassana leader, and I was just like, I have to leave. And he's like, okay. There was like a story of another guy who wanted to leave and asked to leave, and then the leader, really convinced him to stay. I just walked in, I was like, thank you very much for having me. I'm really sorry, I have to leave right now. And he was like, okay, good luck. And I am walking out of the Vipassana center. I've just left all of this has happened in such a short period of time. My ego is bruised, but I'm pretty stoked because I remember getting in a tuk-tuk and I was just like, coffee. Where is the nearest coffee? Like, take me to the coffee place. And I'm sitting and I'm having a coffee, and it dawned on me, and I realized that I had told the whole world that I was going to be offline until the end of Vipassana. So I basically said to myself, okay, I have until Vipassana's over, and I've told all of these people, all of my clients. At the time, my team was just Simona. Everyone, my parents, my friends, my family, everyone thinks that I'm offline. All I'm going to do is write this book. And I went to a Sri Lankan town called Kandy with a K. I think I was definitely drawn to the place because of its name. Like, if there's a city called Kandy, how do you not go? And I stayed in a hostel. It was a 24-room hostel. I'll never forget it. It was like 3 different levels, so you could have a bunk on the bottom, in the middle, or on the top, and 4 rows and 24 people in one room. And all I did for those 6 days, all I did was write the book. And I wrote about 90% of the book during that time. I would wait. I didn't tell anyone. I would go to a gym. Maybe at that time I was probably still going to a gym. I was going to the gym, and all I would do is just write. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't read anything. I didn't do anything. I would just write and write and write and write. And I wrote 90% of the book in those 6 days. And again, the motivation for me at that particular point was, if I didn't write the book, then I was a quitter. That was the way that I positioned it in my mind. And I have to say that upon reflection, there's something very, very powerful. I think we always have to be kind to ourselves and generous and supportive to ourselves, but also sometimes we just need to get shit done. And like in your life, something's going on, like sometimes you just need to get it done. And I think that whatever way you can find to motivate yourself to do something that you know that's really, really important for you, you can leverage that. And for me, it was a very, very simple narrative in my mind. If I write the book, then I justify leaving Vipassana. If I don't write the book, then I'm a quitter and a failure, and I wasn't able to make it through, which means that I'm weak, or whatever narrative or story. I don't know. Looking back, right now, I'm not evaluating how healthy this mindset or these proposition of thoughts were in my mind, but I am certain that at that time, that's what drove me. And it really did drive me. And I was able to write most of the book then. Then I continued writing, over probably 1 month after leaving Vipassana, the book was finished. Then I started working with an editor, and everything took place from there. And the big lesson that I learned in that particular regard was, sometimes you just have to trick your brain into finding a way to do something that you have to do. Because the truth is, when I look back on the story of Conscious Counsel, of my business, writing the Yoga Law book was something very, very critical in the growth and development and marketing of my business. But also personally, it showed me that I was able to write a book. And at this time, I'm 33 years old, and I've worked in the NFL as a writer. I've worked in writing and marketing for a lot of years in my life. And everyone always asks me, and still asks me, like, when are you going to write a book? When's your book? When's your book coming out? What's your book going to be? And it was just this thing a chip that I had on my shoulder, that there was a thing that I wanted to do that I'd never been able to do. And it took the extreme circumstances of going to a Vipassana center in northern Sri Lanka and essentially sleeping on the floor and eating crackers every day for dinner and meditating for 10 hours a day and whatever it is, to bring me to that brink of pushing me over the edge to make it happen. I always had it in me. I still have it in me to write more when the time is right for me to do so. Maybe I have to go back to Vipassana, so I have an excuse to leave again. It's just a joke. But in all seriousness, when I proved to myself that I could write a book, everything else in my life opened up for me. And it was a difficult barrier to break. But once I saw that I could do that, then I had this belief in myself that I can do anything. Like, if I can be a lawyer and work online in 2017 and write a book about yoga law and have it be well received and get a lot of clients from it, then I don't know, it's so silly even as I say it out loud. But again, all of it came from that being at the precipice of that challenging moment and having I think the guts to accept failure and accept myself as a failure and to quit something in order for something bigger that intuitively I knew I had to do was one of the most defining moments of my life, personally and professionally. My time in Sri Lanka overall was fantastic, and I had a lot more fun when I left Kandy, and then I was back online and doing my normal things. Sri Lanka was super charming. I spent a New Year's 2017 turning 2018, I spent in a beach town called Marissa Beach. I was there with, at the time, my co-founder and partner for the Muskoka Yoga Festival, Ashley Boone. We had a blast. We went surfing. I lasted 4 minutes in the water, not afraid of being a quitter when it comes to surfing. She loves surfing, but Sri Lanka was super cool. I rented a scooter. I drove around. I think I played street cricket every single day when I was in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka it was so cool. It's a much more relaxed version of what India is. There's delicious food. The people are really friendly. There's incredible nature. And I just had a great trip. After I left Vipassana and took those 7 days to write what would become the Yoga Law book. And when I always think about Sri Lanka, I just think about cricket. Just because the boys were always up for it. Whatever group it was, they would always let me play. They would always let me join. And I bowled a couple of wickets, and I really enjoyed that. But when I look back on the whole Vipassana experience, it actually was, and again, I'll circle back to what I started with, that sometimes you make a decision, you do something, and in a very, very short period of time, you make a tremendous and profound change, modification, improvement, shift in your life. And Sri Lanka for me was two things. One is, I can say the 4 days of doing Vipassana meditation built the foundation for a daily meditation practice in my life. And I can say that since then, which this was December 2017, I have missed maybe, let's say 10 days of meditation since December 2017. If I count the days where I wasn't hungover, like since I stopped drinking alcohol also, I don't think that I've missed a single day of meditation since leaving Vipassana. So Vipassana gave me the tools to meditate and the foundation to meditate and taught me to meditate. And even those 4 days completely transformed my life. It also was an experience where I was confronted with a particular issue and I was able to overcome my ego and accept failure and accept loss, but turn it into a motivation and a motivating factor, which further would then just propel my business, and way even more than my business, just it would propel my self-confidence and my ability to believe in myself. And it's so crazy when you think about sometimes you have to quit something and you have to label yourself as a quitter or someone who wasn't able to finish something that they committed to, and have that be the story, the start, the seed, the inception of the story that you really can create anything that you want, however it is that you want it. And that's why Sri Lanka always will just be magical for me. I haven't been back since. It's not a place that I'm necessarily running back to. I have a friend visiting me now. He was in Sri Lanka for 3 weeks this year and he loved it. And I loved it too, but it just happened to be a certain place where these different experiences all aligned for me at once, and it propelled me and took me to the next level. So if anything, I think this emphasizes our ability to choose in any given moment. Like, okay, cool, am I a quitter? And if I am a quitter, did I quit for the right reason? And did I quit with integrity? And did I quit in a way that will help move me towards the person that I want to be? And then also just the random fun adventure of traveling and just choosing a random Vipassana center in the north of Sri Lanka that's super remote and hard to get to, and getting there and then leaving and being so grateful for that experience. And lastly, it's following your impulses. Up to that moment where I had that question of, would I be okay if I quit Vipassana and wrote the book and I realized, yes, that is what I should do? that thought never existed. It didn't cross my mind. I didn't think about the book for the first 4 days. And then it just came in and I was like, this is it. And everything is the story that we tell ourselves. So I hope that you enjoyed this story that I told you. Wherever it is in the world you are, I hope you're doing fantastic. I hope that this can serve as some form of lesson. You can laugh at me as you like, but hopefully it's a lesson for you to take some action or reframe something in your life. And whatever it is that you do, stay different. Peace.